Hey listeners, welcome to COMM-versations, the show where we sit down and have a conversation with one of the faculty members that makes up the communication department here at Augusta University. Our goal is to help you get to know some of these amazing people and make your education a little easier.
And so today we're interviewing Dr. Pamela Hayward, and we're just going to start off with her telling us a little bit about herself.
Are you interested? How big of a story do you want, I guess, for that question?
As much as you're willing to share. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'll do is just tell you what I do here, and then if you want to go backwards, I'll let you decide that. I'm a professor of communication here, and I teach predominantly communication studies courses like interpersonal communication, small group communication, theoretical perspectives. I've also for many years taught the COMM-1110, which is our intro to public speaking, so I work a lot with incoming freshmen. I've been here since 2001. Prior to being here, I was an associate professor at Lake Superior State University in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'll also add, too, just as a side note, I'm also the director of our integrated studies program. So I wear two hats here, where I help advise and direct a program where students can create their own general studies degree.
I think all of the professors we've talked to have taught public speaking, at least in some capacity. Is that like a rite of passage that you guys have to go through?
It depends partly on the graduate program that you go to. So, for example, when I was at the University of Illinois, I was hired as a teaching assistant, along with being a student there. And so since most students on that campus had to take the intro public speaking, regardless of major, that was one of the classes that they needed a lot of people to teach. Mm-hmm. And so often the student teaching or graduate teaching assistants would teach that course. However, I know some of my colleagues came through different tracks and are much more focused on like media studies or journalism. And if they came from more pure media studies or journalism programs, they're not as likely to have been teaching that class. Okay. Once they come here, often they do try it and enjoy it. And so sometimes we do have people in the more media and journalism and teaching it. But so many of us already had been teaching it before we got here and kind of had our feet wet. But others, it'll be a new experience for them. But also here, because it's required for all students, we have many sections of it. Yeah. And so it's certainly one where that's why we need to spread out and fill it with different faculty members.
Yeah. Another question we've been asking is what inspired you to pursue the field of education? And also, could you talk a little bit about like your college career and like how it led to you pursuing education?
Okay. That'll be a bit of a long story, but
it's okay.
Hopefully interesting. Yeah. So when I was in high school, I originally thought I would probably be a psychology major because I was interested in becoming a psychologist. Although like a lot of my extracurriculars were involved in the communication end of the world, communication wasn't as popularly of a broadcasted major to students. So I don't know that it was really on my radar. When I went to college, I did start taking psychology courses and really did enjoy them, but started feeling like maybe that wasn't the direction I would go in. But I was taking for my free electives, I just, every time I would look in the catalog, I'm like, well, this media writing class looks cool, or this acting class looks cool, or different communication film classes. It was like a very eclectic major. Yeah. And so slowly but surely I started realizing like, hey, I am doing all the communication courses. So then when it was time to declare a major as a sophomore, then I ended up choosing communication. Okay. But it was a really broad base just because, again, it was like a program that was a little of everything. My goal was to hopefully write because I did a lot of creative writing when I was younger and had some recognition for it. I had a one-year scholarship for creative writing at my university. Cool. But it's funny because I thought I would do something, but I never figured out how I would do it. So it clearly that's not what I'm doing right now. But my dream job and what I thought I might do is I had always wanted to be a script writer, like for a comedy sitcom or something, like to work in a writer's room.
That's really cool.
I know, that would be really cool, wouldn't it? And so that's what I thought I would do. But I never really thought of like talking to a faculty mentor or trying to learn how to do that or what would it take to do it. So I did take some like media writing classes, but in college, they recommended that you take a journalism class, even though that was not my interest, because my faculty advisor said pretty much everybody expects a comm major when they graduate to be able to do journalistic things. It was a plus and a minus because I did sign up for the class, but there ended up being no actual class. The professor just said, go work for the school paper. And so I had no training. It was a little awkward. Someone I had dated was the editor, and so there was some awkwardness there as well, but it all worked worked out. But then my last semester, I had planned to do an internship, and my advisor had forgotten that. And so by the time he was sending me out on interviews, a lot of the internships were already taken. So I ended up finding one on my own. It was just a local newspaper in my neighborhood, which is always like when you're that age, it's the last place you want to be. But then they ended up taking me on. And so then I worked full time that summer. And the woman who was the reporter who was training me there ended up leaving to take another job. And so then they offered me her position. So I was a journalist for a few years, and then also worked in advertising and marketing. I told you it was a long story. I had taken like 1 or 2 graduate courses just out of personal interest. I think I've always kind of been academic by nature, but they weren't really leading anywhere. And then there was a year where I had gotten downsized and just had a great difficulty finding a job. And it was really a difficult year for me. And I thought, I had thought about grad school anyways. I'm like, I had like nothing to lose. So then I just decided, well, how about if I look into that? And so originally I thought I would just go for a master's degree. But what happened was, as we were talking before this interview, I was talking to Aaron, that often graduate students are often offered a teaching assistantship to help defray the cost of their tuition. And so I was able to do that. I was accepted at the University of Illinois. And then just, I thought teaching assistant meant like I would help a teacher because we didn't have teaching assistants. It wasn't as common at the university I went to. And then all of a sudden I got like a letter in the mail with a textbook, and it's like, congratulations, you're teaching like 2 sections of public speaking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never even taken a public speaking course. Although I had done public speaking, I was on the speech team in high school and all of that. But we had a pretty good training program. And the first day in the classroom was probably one of the most nervous days of my life because your biggest concern is somebody's going to ask you a question you don't know the answer to, like something like chapter 5. We're not even there, and like I haven't read chapter 5 yet either. But it just clicked, and I loved it. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was just like it was meant to be, even though it was nothing I ever thought of doing as a career. And the person who was mentoring me asked if I would get involved in helping mentor other teachers. So I ended up working a lot with training other teaching assistants. And my own research area is in communication education, instructional communication. So that became a big part of who I am.
Wow.
And then here I am.
You mentioned that at one point you wanted to write for a comedy sitcom. If someone approached you, would you consider like switching over now, or are you kind of set in teaching?
And what's your favorite comedy sitcom?
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard one.
What was airing at that time, actually?
Well, and I should tell you, you're going to find out I'm really old.
Maybe I shouldn't have asked that.
Well, no, you probably wouldn't even know this show, I don't think. But there was a TV show, it's in black and white, but I think it was reruns even when I was a kid, but it's called The Dick Van Dyke Show.
I know what you're talking about.
And he's a comedy writer, but there's a woman who works, there's like 2 men and a woman in the writer's room. And that was the first time I'd really seen a woman do it. And she's kind of, and I've always been pretty comfortable joking around or comfortable with having male and female friends. And so I'm like, that just looks like an awesome job atmosphere. Of course it's on TV, but also Mary Tyler Moore was pretty popular, and she was this very independent woman working in news and all of that. So I think some of those things kind of inspired me, but I don't know that I have a favorite comedy. I haven't watched as many of the more newer ones outside of like, it's not even that new anymore, like BoJack Horseman or something like that, which is animated. But yeah,
that's an interesting one.
At first I started watching, I think my niece recommended it. We often we're like ages apart, but we find out we end up watching some of the same things. And at first I wasn't sure if I liked it or not, but then like eventually I did a second watch during COVID, and I really ended up really liking it.
Okay.
It's so interesting to know that you watched that show. I don't know why.
My brother likes that show.
Well, it's a lot easier now for women to succeed in that space. So you probably have a lot easier of a time if you pursued it.
I guess. I don't know. I think it would just be maybe something like if I had a chance to like work on something with somebody as a hobby. I really like what I'm doing, and this is where I belong. And I'm not too far down the road looking at, I guess, next steps after I retire. So maybe that's my next thing. But I still do some creative writing, and I'm part of the Augusta Authors Club of Augusta and things like that.
That's really cool.
So I have my outlets.
Yeah.
But thank you for asking.
What is the funniest story you can tell us? about anything?
I don't know if this is funny, but maybe quirky. When I was a newspaper reporter, one of the beats that I had was one of the towns I would do the police report for that town. And this is before we weren't even using computers. I mean, computers existed, but a lot of places hadn't transferred to using computers. So I'm still typing things on a typewriter, et cetera. And so you would go to the police station, and actually they would give you the reports, and you'd sit in a room like this and then have to take notes, et cetera, and then go back and write your stories. So I guess there's two things related to that. One is one day when I came in, the chief of police, who I gotten to know, he asked me if I would be in a police lineup. So which was totally different than it is on TV. So they just asked random people there who were wearing reasonably, like, we were just working. Some of the women worked there. I was there. They just needed women. And so we weren't in like a, I don't know, like you see on TV where there's like wall with like people's heights on the back, and there's somebody behind a window. They just walk us into this room, and we're just standing there. And then this woman comes in. No, I'm sorry. There was a woman with us who was not dressed professionally. Surprise. And then the person comes in. I think it was someone who was accused of like breaking into his house or something. And so then he's asked to identify like who the person is. And I'm thinking like, what if I got chosen? but he, you see this young woman is like crying and everything. And I'm like, I think this is kind of obvious where this is going. Cut and dry. So, And then one other time I was going to another even smaller town for their police report, and I got pulled over by the police. And I'm like, that's weird. I'm not speeding or anything. And then they just let me go. And when I got to the counter in the police department, the woman I knew there who worked with the records, she's like, I heard you got pulled over. And she's like, do you know why? And I'm like, she's like, you exactly matched the description of someone who's like a wanted felon or something.
Oh my gosh.
So I guess this person in the small town probably thought like, ooh, this is going to be a really good catch. I've like got, and there's just like the random reporter that comes to their place. So.
That is a quirky story.
That's funny. So what have been some highlights in your career so far?
Oh gosh, there's so many, and it's just I think like quite a few years ago I was chair of our department for a number of years, and prior to that I had been the assistant chair of a department, and so just really helping to move the department in a positive direction and representing it, that was really important and really rewarding to me. I think though, like even today, I went to see someone give a guest lecture over in the library, and I was walking out. It was kind of crowded, and all of a sudden somebody stops me, and they're like, Dr. Hayward. And they're like, do you remember me? And I did, and it was one of my students that I had from a number of years ago. And she now, for many years now, she's worked here at AU, like in the communications area, but she's now moved into public relations at the hospital and just doing really well with this larger Wellstar corporation. It was just so good to see her. And then while we're talking, another student comes up and is like, Dr. Hayward. And she's like, do you remember me? And it's another student from probably 15 years ago. But we used to have a communication studies track where we had like a senior project specific for that. And I just remember getting to work with her on hers. And she was just a very bright, both these women were very bright and capable. And it appears that she's doing quite well and now going back to get a graduate degree. And it was just those things happened to me a lot. And so just having that connection with students. But I think I don't know. I think a lot of the highlights are, for example, I just went to the Georgia Communication Association conference a couple weekends ago, and one of our students, Butch Cross, he was with me because he was presenting his project. But it was just so cool to watch him give his presentation and be well received, or even just to, we're just like colleagues when we're there. We're eating lunch with different people and meeting people, and it's just great to show off our students. But so I think probably my most rewarding things here do have to do with working with students and seeing them succeed.
Yeah, that segues nicely into you've been working here since 2001 is what you said?
Yeah, I've been here the longest out of anyone in our department.
What's the biggest change, other than the name change, which we talked about this morning? What's the biggest change that you've seen on campus?
Can I pick more than one?
Yeah, of course.
So there's a couple of things that have changed, and some were gradual and some more dramatic. But I would say something that was a gradual change when I first came here. It was not a big proportion, but we did have a larger proportion of our students who were a little bit older, often with families. For many years, I would frequently teach classes in the evening, but then eventually we hit a point where those classes weren't filling anymore because the population and the demographics of our major is much more, many more traditional age students now, and so that's been a shift. Even when I came in, I used to teach a class for the MBA program. They used to offer a communication class, and then eventually that switched out. But I would be teaching evening classes there. But just the demographics of the communication major have changed, and even the campus somewhat as well. I think another change, which most people wouldn't be familiar with, which is before all of the consolidation stuff, was that when I first came here, we were part of a very large department called Languages, Literature, and Communication. So if you took like our English and World Languages department and then put us into the mix, and then also they oversaw the humanities core classes. And so it was a very large department, and we were just like one segment of it. A few years after I was here, the dean's office or the university decided to break communication off onto its own. So I was part of that first group of people who got to create the department as a freestanding department. That was the point when I was assistant chair. So it was really cool to be a part of that, and kind of we found we really had a good experience before and had good colleagues. But just I think because most of us, at least at that time, had come from the field of communication. We're people who can work pretty well on deadlines. We're not just academics. We've kind of came into academics a little later in life for many of us. And so we just really started to thrive and get a lot of positive attention.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, then a number of years after that, we had the consolidation with the health sciences campus. There's been some real pluses. And anytime I've had a chance to be on a committee or work on projects with people from there, it's been fantastic. But it was a big cultural shift, and it was very upsetting for a lot of people on both ends of it. And so there's just a lot of that going on in the workplace where I didn't love it, but I tend to be a go with the flow kind of.
Sure.
I know just kind of my personality is maybe a bit more even, where I kind of knew that unless it got really bad, this is probably where I'm going to ride it out. So I think maybe I had a certain attitude about it. But there have been, so it was complicated because the culture did start changing. It's a bit more corporate. We're a bit more siloed, where before it was a bit more of a family atmosphere. On the other hand, there have been some really positive things. There's a lot more support for professors doing research and funding. And over the years, I'd say another change, which again, you all wouldn't have noticed as much, but I've always had really good colleagues, and we've had a good environment in the Department of Communication. But the last maybe 5 or so years, as people have either retired or we've been able to add more positions, we're just bringing in a lot of young new faculty who are doing a lot of, they're really productive with research, where we had just had maybe a more mid-level of that before, outside of a few exceptions. And I just see them engaging students. Students want to work on research. They're asking about projects. And it's just almost like hitting the reset button on the department. So as someone who knows I'm going to kind of ride it out here, it's just very refreshing to have kind of your environment shift a little, and just in a positive way. So I've been really grateful for the new folks that we've added over the last few years.
I liked that you used the word refreshing. That shows a very positive outlook on it. Because I feel like you could also argue that it's like really hard to see that change, because you've witnessed all of this and now it's becoming a new thing that you're just not as a part of. Yeah,
I think because it has been positive in the way it's handled, and just the people themselves are very like they're team players. We all work well together. I could see maybe with different personalities, maybe I wouldn't say refreshing. But so but we're pretty careful as we hire people that not just their credentials, but we want people who are going to fit, because it's important to our students more than anything.
What other professors were here whenever they made the switch to like having a sole communication department?
Dr. Johnson was here.
Yeah, he brought that up in our episode. Yeah, because
he came a few years after I did, maybe about 3 years after I came. So he came in the early 2000s. Dr. Von Tool was here, but she retired about 2 years ago. Some of our lecturers, like Professor Laura Harrison Graves, would have been here. I believe both professors, Amber and Daniel Ruth, I can't remember. They came to us from the College of Business, so I can't remember if they had made the switch yet, but they would have.
I didn't know that.
Been
That's
at
interesting.
They were working in the advising center there, and then had started teaching for us, and so then we got to absorb them in.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else. There may have been others, but I think
That's a good number of people that
Yeah.
are still here.
But I think many of the people have retired or moved on to other things.
Good retention.
Yeah.
What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, so I guess I get to be honest, right?
Yeah.
A number of years ago, there was a colleague of mine who was a math professor, but we were in an academic reading group together. And then she eventually became the vice president of academic affairs. She's since retired a number of years ago, and she was a terrific person. But she was once giving a presentation, and she said, "I love coming to work every morning. I love my job." And I thought, I love my job, but there's still days you wake up and it's like, well, if we had a snow day, I might be okay with that.
Yeah.
So I really love what I do, and just I think teaching classes is the main thing that gets me out of bed, although I enjoy advising a lot too, which is like a smaller version of that. Because there was, I've always taught every summer, but a number of years ago, there was one summer where just enrollment was down. So we just didn't have a lot of summer teaching. So I didn't teach that summer. And I thought, well, this would be really cool, And then by the end of the summer, I was getting really antsy. And there's a lot of different aspects of my job, but I realized the thing I kept thinking about was getting back in the classroom. And so just getting to work with students, and it's always it's planned, but it's spontaneous. Students always bring so much to the table, and so I think that has the biggest impact on how I get here every day.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, so you guys have a big job. You just have to make sure
Yeah.
keep me showing up.
I take my role very
Yes,
seriously.
thank you.
Can you tell us about like the biggest challenges you've faced in your career so far?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is, even though I came out of a graduate program that's really known as like what we call like a Research 1 program, I didn't have as much guidance or training in terms of like developing publications, et cetera. And so I've had to really kind of figure it out on my own. And I don't know that. So I've been productive, but not at a level I would like to be. So that's something I still always feel like I'm learning. Like it's something I should have down more than I do. So, I mean, I've had, good reviews of my work and all of that, but it's just something where I'm always kind of have a bit of an imposter syndrome in that regard. So I think that's something I think I still find to be a challenge, but it's rewarding when it all works out.
Yeah.
Okay. Normally we do this segment at the end of an episode, but I feel like it's very natural to immediately segue into it. So I have a screenshot of a negative Rate My Professor review. And it was hard to find a negative recent one. I was unable to do that. This is from 2009. And
Oh my gosh.
and so I would like you to read this out loud for us and then tell us about your sentiment around it, basically.
Okay. Well, I'm going to preface it by saying that, in fact, part of my dissertation dealt with student evaluations of professors. So
Really?
I'm somewhat familiar with the research in that area, but that site didn't exist at the time I was doing my dissertation. But, when that first came out, I would check it once in a while. And I'm open to people not liking me or my class. But there was a point like a year or two in where there was one semester where there was one really unrealistic comment and one that was just like a really mean personal comment that I'd never really had that from a student before. And I thought, I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so, so then, because one person, that wasn't the mean comment, but somebody said like, this is a super easy class. And like that semester, it was unfortunate. Just a lot of students dropped the ball. I think that semester across, I think I was teaching 3 or 4 classes, a third of my students had received D's or F's, which was so deflating because you feel like, what was I doing? What happened? It was just people weren't turning things in, or it was just a different time at the university where some people came that were not as prepared. And so I thought that's probably true for that student, but I'm like, that's going to be really misleading for other people who are going to take that class. And it was like in a lower division class. So I haven't looked at Rate My Professor for years, but when I was visiting for family for Christmas, out of the blue, my oldest nephew's wife said, she's like, I hope this isn't weird, but I just got curious one day and I just pulled you up on Rate My Professor. And she's like, it actually looked pretty good. Like she was actually like, oh, that's really cool. So I've been curious now, but I haven't gone back. So that's my story. Oh no. Okay. And this is from 2009.
That's a long time ago.
Oh, okay. It says, if you ask her for help, she gets an attitude with you. I think I remember this one. She expects you to know the syllabus, and if you ask anything that is on the syllabus, she gets an attitude with you. With all the classes we have, who really has time to study a syllabus? She doesn't really go over the material that will be on the test, even after weeks, so that makes it hard. I don't know who wrote that, but I know it was a period of time, and it's fair. It's fair they can say that. It was a period of time when, like, we didn't have D2L. You would physically hand out a syllabus in class, so people would carry it, in a folder and everything. And so, one of the things I would always say if somebody's like, "Hey, when are we covering chapter 5?" I'm like, "Oh, have you checked the syllabus yet?" And I think some people find that offensive, where it wouldn't be like, well, I'm not going to tell you. It's on there. You should read it yourself. It's more like, I put a lot of time in this document. But it's more, I guess when I do that, I guess ideally I'm hoping students could see that information is there. This would be a really good tool for you to use.
Yeah.
But it's not like I wouldn't tell them if they didn't know or hadn't looked at or had the wrong date. But so that one was a little frustrating. But so usually if people would ask me a question, I would typically often say, "Oh, have you already checked this first?" Just to maybe put the idea in their head there's a place they can check. So I can live with that one. But weirdly enough, I think that's around the time I stopped reading Rate My Professor.
I'm glad you pointed out that D2L wasn't around then, because that recontextualizes it quite a bit.
Well, but then it would make it even easier because assuming people don't always carry stuff with them, you'd have classes where nobody has a pencil or paper.
Oh my gosh.
They're kind of there. But I forget what the system was before D2L. Some people had started using whatever that was, but most of us hadn't started using it yet. So then, there wasn't necessarily like an electronic holding place for course materials that would be as common. You photocopied things and always handed things out the first day of class. But yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I'm having like
thank
a
you
flashback.
Thank you for humoring us.
Thanks for re-traumatizing me.
I'm so sorry.
I had forgotten about that one.
Okay, this next one is my favorite question. What's your guilty pleasure outside of your career?
Well, I would say it's such an obvious one would be chocolate. And I think in one of our videos in COMM Theory, they always talk about like death by chocolate cake. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. I am one of those people that like I will end up like watching something on streaming and I will binge watch things.
Yeah.
And often the weird thing is when I was younger, I was like a big film person. Like I was that person who was going to like art house movie theaters. I would like in grad school, I would ride my bike. It's like me and 3 people watching some French foreign film.
Oh my gosh.
Like I would just see everything. Even part of the attraction of coming here was they had a film series. Because at that time you couldn't really get access to a lot of independent or foreign films. I was that person at the video store who's like the one of 4 people checking out like some obscure and then over time I find like I should be watching a movie, but it's like that will take too long.
Yeah.
Like, my brain is getting rewired, I think, with technology. But then I'll sit down and watch like one episode of something and then all of a sudden like 3 hours later. Like recently I was watching I don't know if you've seen the show Hacks. Which is about a comedian and people writing comedy. So there you have it. Wow. It's like an aging comedian who hires a young woman to sort of help replenish her career.
Oh, I've heard about this. Okay.
But I'm like, well, I'll just watch one episode. I heard this was kind of good. And then like, as the evening goes on, I'm like, well, I guess I've watched most of them. Then like I could have watched 2 movies in the time I watched this. So
is it good? Is the show good?
I like it. My niece, who I share recommend, she started watching it. She likes it. She doesn't like the young person as much, but at least we kind of agree.
Yeah.
Like, she's a really interesting character, but I thought, well, maybe it's a generational thing. But I think it's pretty clever and fun. But I kind of like that world, or like there's a podcast I listen to where it's a comedian who interviews a lot of comedians. And so you kind of hear about that world and that lifestyle and stuff. So I guess this show kind of fits into that
world.
That world. So. Yeah.
This next question is a little complicated, so just bear with me.
Okay.
And I've been trying to get better at explaining it. So
you look serious, though. I feel like I might be tearing up a little bit because I don't know what this is.
No.
Okay.
If you could telepathically tell every student on campus something simultaneously, what would you tell all of them? For reference, Dr. Johnson said it's in the syllabus, is what he would tell all of them.
He gave me a mug that says that.
Really?
Yes.
I guess he just likes that phrase a lot.
I think I would tell students that like you are seen no matter how much you think you aren't, like we notice that you're there and we care about you being there, and that showing up is really half the battle. And I would let students know, as much as we celebrate and we're excited when students do really well, and I know those are often the students that we highlight here at the university. You know, I've talked, our colleagues, we've talked about this. Some of our most successful graduates were like the B students, but they're just a little, I don't know how to explain it, a bit more street smarts, or also people who know, like, okay, I'm in this job, but even if it's not the exact title I was hoping for, I can make this work and move this into something else. So people who can kind of think fast on their feet. So I guess I would say that, you know, showing up is half the battle. So just like be there, be present, but, you know, be open to whatever comes to you. There may be all kinds of opportunity. I never even thought I'd be doing this for a living. I've done it for many years now, and I would not trade it for anything. But had you asked me when I was your age, it would never. It was never on my radar. But then life kind of led me through some positive and negative situations. But then, you know, because I was open to that. I just hope everybody's open to different opportunities and options. So don't give up on yourself, and know that there's always other doors that can open for you.
That's very wise.
Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it. It's good for me. I'm not the straight A student.
You don't have to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at everything you do and how involved you are, and you're doing all the things.
Yeah.
You will have no problem when you graduate. Neither will. I mean, both of you will do very well.
Nice.
And we
We
brag
hope.
about. I mean, I would say I know every department brags about their students, but when you look at almost all of our students after graduation have a job, they're actually jobs in the field. I mean, there's a few people that it just doesn't click, or maybe they kind of want certain opportunities that this might not be the location for. But like I said, I just ran into 2 graduates today, and they're flourishing and doing great and have moved in different directions. And that's just so true. Our students really represent us well. We're really pleased with, I mean, and you all are making that happen too. So
y'all do a good job.
Yeah, we've talked about in both episodes now, or the now 3 episodes, where you guys talk about the students a lot. And that's really interesting to see the like web of, if I tell a professor something, it gets spread to the other professor in a positive way, because you guys use it to help us.
Most of the time positive.
Sure.
No, I was talking, I told one professor that I was sick one day, and then I went into my class like 3 days later, and a different professor was like, "Are you feeling better?" And I was like, I didn't tell you I was sick. How did you know?
Were you feeling better?
I'm going to share personal information unless confidential if necessary. So it wasn't me. I guess I was sick.
It was just silly.
We're just excited about our students, and I can't speak for everyone in the department, but I think it would be true for most, if not all of us. Like, we all could have looked for different types of universities, but I think most of us are here because we wanted to be someplace where we would get a lot of student contact and teach smaller classes, and not be someplace where there's like 2,000 communication majors,
Right.
which that does have a plus. I mean, or things where, you know, you're teaching one class, but basically you're focusing mainly on your research with graduate students. And again, that's awesome too. But I think most of us are here just because we kind of fit the mold more of, like, you know, we want to know your names. We do know your names, but that's not for every professor. But I think people kind of gravitate towards AU, not just in the communication department, but other departments as well. So I think that's part of something a lot of us would have in common as professors.
Yeah. Whenever I think about our department, I think about like quality over quantity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to ask, how many comm students are enrolled right now?
You'd have to ask Dr. Bola for sure, but I help oversee advising as part of my duties in the department. And I want to say this is a rough number. I think we're at about 130 majors.
That's really cool.
Of those 130, how many do you think you would say you know, like on a personal level?
I would say that the freshmen and sophomores I would not know as well, because they may not be in classes that I teach yet. Outside of, like, I was lucky enough to have Lydia in my COMM 1110 class. Yeah. So, and she did a podcast
had me
assignment
twice in one semester.
That's
But
funny.
it's one of the reasons that I'm like, I don't feel like anyone owns a class, because so many of us can teach so many different things in the department. But I admit, over the years, because I've been teaching the theory class, it's in the Keystone, so everyone has to take it. So unless somebody's a transfer student, I get to meet everybody pretty much from junior to senior year.
That must be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say I get to know most of the students pretty well if they've made it up to the junior level.
That's a big if.
if they have, at the point they come, like the people who might still be in the sophomore level classes, I might meet them or we come to their classes to recruit. But those I may not know as well.
Yeah.
But even like I was just advising someone and we were filling out the graduation application. I'm like, this is a really awesome student. I'm like, how come I don't really know them very well? And then I see they haven't taken theory yet. That's why. So now I know them, and then I will know them even more in the
when
fall.
they eventually get to theory.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate that I do teach a class that most everybody's going to take.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot for me to stay on top of what's happening with all of our students.
Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the professors have that one class that's kind of their like main class that they're teaching. Like Dr. Johnson has advanced public speaking.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And well, I will say what I think is interesting is Dr. Bulla, sometimes he teaches the COMM 2010, but he doesn't always teach a course everyone has to take. But I would be hard pressed to mention a student that he doesn't at least know something about them. So he's really good as chair, just having a sense of like who everybody is in the department, even if he's only met them in passing or something. Yeah. So he really retains that really well. And I've always been very impressed and happy about that.
Yeah.
That's a good trait to have, especially in this field. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Johnson was right. This was fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for talking to us today. Are there any closing remarks you'd like to share with us, or?
No, I think, as I said, Dr. Johnson told me this was fun, and I would agree with him now. So very good.
Nice.
And you all did a great job too.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you soon, or talk to you soon.
Or we'll see you.
Yeah, maybe.